Hey guys, tonight we drift toward a lamplit gate on the high road, where the wind tastes faintly of salt and copper, and where your camel breathes a foggy ribbon into the blue dusk. Canvas creaks, bells answer bells. The desert doesn't sleep, it only lowers its voice, and you lower yours with it, as lanterns swing over an archway cut with a pattern like patiently folded paper. You step into a current of heat, cumin, and tired laughter. And I'll be honest, without a few unspoken rules, you probably won't survive this with your dignity intact. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is for you, because somewhere out there, another traveler is also easing off the saddle. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your hand is still on the lead rope when etiquette taps your shoulder. You dismount before the arch, not under it. People have opinions about everything here: spices, stars, camel knees. But riding under the lintel says, I'm a guest who forgot to bring manners. At most caravanserais, roadside inns strung like beads from Merv to Kashgar, there's a rhythm to entry you can feel in your ribs. This much is mainstream truth. These forts of rest often sit a day's journey apart, close to water, their walls squared against wind and opportunists, a courtyard wrapped with stables and cells, and a gatehouse with a ledger desk and a brazier that refuses to die. You walk the last 20 steps, dust loosened by each heel like a small offering. The gatekeeper looks like every gatekeeper you have ever imagined. Eyebrows that got promoted to captain, a ring of keys that clinks like a modest treasure, and a patience that survived 4 empires and 100 loud traders who all insist their bale of wool is somehow urgent. He doesn't bark. He glances at your hands, your reins, your eyes, and then at your shadow, as if to see whether the desert kept any of your honesty. You whisper your name, not because he's suspicious, but because the gate keeps the world outside, and the whisper keeps the courtyard calm. Quiet at the threshold is the first kindness you can offer to a space designed for rest. Custom prefers you state where you came from and where you intend to go, as if pinning a neat thread on a map only he can see. Historians still argue whether that ritual sprang from practical security or from an older Zoroastrian sense that truth spoken at a gate binds travelers to good conduct inside. Either way, you oblige. Your camel sways, unimpressed, and emits a muffled complaint that sounds like an accordion with opinions. You promise the gatekeeper that your animal's loudest ideas will be saved for tomorrow. He almost smiles. When? Behind him, the courtyard hums low. A boy lifts a dipper from the cistern. Water loops silver into a feed trough. A baker slides a flat round from a tandoor whose mouth glows like a small sunrise. And somewhere a reckoner counts on his knuckles. 1, 2, 3, perhaps rental for a stall, perhaps the price of sesame. There's no 5-star plaque by the door, no concierge with a carnation, but there's a way of doing things so smooth it feels like silk that forgot to brag. Here's your first small, almost invisible move. You loosen your scarf and shake out only the amount of sand that can leave your person without insulting the threshold. Entire handfuls? Rude. A shy cloud? Acceptable. Then you push your sleeves to show your palms, empty but for the lead rope, because nobody wants surprises near animals bigger than everyone's ego. A mainstream fact tucked into this choreography: Sogdian merchants, the great middlemen of late antiquity, spoke and bargained across languages. In this courtyard, courtesy is a language too, one that translates even faster than prices. The gatekeeper tilts his head toward the stable wing. You'll get your receipt later: paper, wood slip, or a clay tally, nicked and matched. But first you earn trust by doing the quiet tasks in the right order. You step to the side of the doorway and take a breath before crossing. Thresholds are where mistakes live. Here's a fringe tidbit murmured by the old-timers. Some gatekeepers used to hang a tiny sachet of dill under the arch to sweeten the air and calm skittish camels. It smells like rain remembering herbs. Maybe it's superstition, maybe it's veterinary science with good taste. Inside, the rule of eyes applies. You let yours adjust before you stare. You don't count other people's cargo like a taxman in a daydream. You don't compare saddles out loud. You definitely don't announce that your bale of dyed wool is a better blue than anyone else's, even if it is the sort of blue that could stop a priest mid-blessing. Save that for the market wing. Bragging has a home, and it's not the doorway. A traveling monk coughs. A turfan vintner snores gently on a bench. A hunter feeds his dog a crumb he pretends not to notice. The quiet here is communal property, like the cistern or the stars overhead. You edge toward the ledger table, but pause because the ledger comes later on this night's soft choreography. For now, you give the shared space a respectful glance, like greeting a room in which everyone is already half asleep. You murmur to your camel, "Yes, you are the hero," which is both good animal management and a joke you tell yourself because self-care is allowed even on a trade route. The animal chews, forgiving you for everything except the existence of stairs. At last the gatekeeper takes your name again, softer now, and tags your gear with a loop of cord and a small wooden slip scratched with marks you can read if you squint and pretend the ink behaves. Is it Sogdian? Maybe. Is it Persian? Also maybe. Historians still argue whether the everyday hands in places like this were more likely to scribble in Sogdian script, in cursive Persian, or in a messy, glorious bilingual shorthand that worked precisely because no scholar was watching. Before you move deeper, your fingers find the little pouch at your belt. Raisins sleep there, wrinkled suns, sweet and uncomplicated. Not yet. You're saving that courtesy for the first formal greeting. For now, you breathe the courtyard's particular perfume: charcoal, camel, bread, and the penny metal tang of coins warmed by human hope. The lanterns blink a little in the breeze like eyes warming to you. You step forward, and the night folds you in. You slip the little pouch from your belt, the one you teased in your mind back at the gate, and pinch it open with 2 fingers so the scent can walk out first. Kishmish, sun-shriveled grapes, sweet and a bit floral. The kind of simple luxury that travels better than apologies. Courtesy here likes to be edible. You don't fling your generosity like confetti. You present 3 or 4 raisins on a clean palm, not stacked, not sticky, like coins that decided to retire early. The gatekeeper nods, and the nod ripples outward to the hostler, to the boy with the dipper, and to the clerk whose pen is already itching. Fruit, then words, then business, like a recipe. Sweetness first, then steam. You choose a greeting that behaves well across the map. Peace, you say, just above a whisper. If the listener favors Arabic, it meets them where they stand. If Persian, the word bends politely. If Sogdian, your tone does most of the heavy lifting. Mainstream fact, Between the 5th and 8th centuries, Sogdian speech worked like a trade wind for Central Asia. Merchants used it to bargain from Samarkand to the oases of the Tarim, papers and conversations knotting together in a rough, friendly lingua franca. You don't have to be perfect, you have to be gentle. The gatekeeper answers with a phrase that has more S's than you were expecting, and pockets one raisin for later, as if stashing away one sunny minute. There's a dance to this exchange that doesn't require choreography notes. You offer, they acknowledge. You repeat your name, they repeat the end's reputation. Quiet, clean water, fair scales, no drama please. And then a tiny ceremony occurs. The clerk brings a small saucer. You drop a raisin into it, and he presses a ring seal into a pad of ink and stamps the saucer's rim, just once, like a friendly comet. It's not a legally binding dessert, but it is a social receipt. Both parties witness sweetness, both parties intend calm. Clay boule and wax seals authenticate bales and letters. Here a brief fruit and ink moment authenticates the atmosphere. Historians still argue whether such micro-rituals ever made it into written rule books, or if they lived only in wrists and eyebrows, passed along like lullabies. That clerk, by the way, wears his signet ring like a tiny moon. The face might be a lion, might be a boar, hard to tell in lamplight, but the practice is older than most arguments. Anybody serious about goods keeps a mark to press. In larger dealings, you'll see boule, clay lozenges pinched onto strings that bite into wrapping twine, each stamped by different hands to form a chain of trust. Tonight, your chain is a saucer and a smile. Honestly, the smile probably does more work than the saucer. Imagine telling a customs officer you paid in goodwill, "Do not try this at home or here." A boy appears with a pinch bowl of salt, just a few grains, nothing dramatic, and touches the rim of the saucer as if seasoning a memory. Quirky tidbit, some old caravanners swear salt keeps gossip from spoiling, that a salted greeting won't ferment into arguments later. Maybe that's chemistry. Maybe that's a superstition with excellent taste. Either way, the boy is pleased to be on in the spell, and you are pleased that your little pouch now has a job title. You move down the shadowed line of faces and repeat the ritual in miniature where it fits. A raisin for the hostler who will walk your camel so the joints don't turn into complaint letters. A raisin for the baker because tomorrow's bread begins tonight. One more for the watchman whose eyelids already look like half-closed shutters. You're not bribing, you're placing small anchors into the night so that should trouble try to sail in, it stubs its toe on kindness. A small joke drifts up. If loyalty programs existed here, they'd be fruit-based. 10 raisins, 1 free story. Fine, you chuckle silently, but don't ask for a manager's special. On the wall above the ledger table hangs a painted board where rules sigh to themselves. No shouting after the 3rd bell. No fires in sleeping cells. Animals water first. And, nicest of all, strangers become neighbors at the edge of the bowl. That last bit is less law than hope, but you see it in motion. A turf-on storyteller trades a proverb for a date. A Khotanese weaver swaps a smile for a place by the brazier. Mainstream fact folded thoughtfully into the scene. Murals from Panjakent show Sogdian banquets with musicians, cups, and yes, heavy clusters of grapes. You can practically hear the plucked strings if you lean your ear toward the past. Historians still argue whether those grape clusters advertise seasonal feasts or just symbolize plenty. Either way, the fruit keeps showing up where people want company. Back at the desk, The clerk scratches on a narrow strip of paper, the kind that makes you nervous, as if one sneezed to delete your existence, and takes your name again along with what he calls gentle particulars: the bundle count, the number of animals, your intention to depart at or after the second dawn bell, and a note that your courtesy has been exemplary. That last clause is a performative compliment. He writes it because you behaved as if you deserved it. Joke 2 floats by. You consider requesting a star sticker. You decide the inked saucer was star enough. You notice a second ring on his other hand, plain and smooth, and when he lifts the paper to blow it dry, you catch a whiff of rosewater. Another fringe habit. The clerk perfumes his fingers so the ink doesn't smell like work when he eats later. Is that practical? Is that vanity? Historians still argue whether such scents signaled rank or simply made the long hours nicer. The answer, like the fragrance, is light and everywhere. Two traders behind you murmur in a mashed-up chain of sounds, salam and shanti and hey ping, peace-hopping languages like stones across a stream. You recognize here the older trick that keeps the road friendly. Say the universal words first and the specific prices later. The clerk rolls your paper into a neat loop and ties it with a thread whose knot he taps 1, 2, then slides a tiny clay bead over it and presses the lion boar moon again. Not strictly necessary for an overnight stay, but it makes you feel like your name learned to stand up straight. Before you pocket the loop, you press one last raisin to the desk, not for eating, but for luck. The gatekeeper doesn't take it, he leaves it there as a witness, a sweet stone. If in an hour someone bangs in loud and proud, the raisin says, "We were doing quiet things here. Please match the volume." As you step away, your pouch lighter by a small sunset, you can feel the courtyard approve. You begin to think etiquette isn't a list at all. It's a flavor you add to the evening so the whole place simmers softly. Your camel, never one to miss a trend, sniffs your hand as if to say, "Raisins are a valid currency." You agree. For tonight, they are the gold of good manners. You angle toward the stable wing, where breath fogs like soft banners, and the floor is a quilt of straw, hoof prints, and old stories. The rule on the board, animals water first, beats like a quiet drum, and you fall in behind it because the surest way to make friends is to let their companions drink. Your camel regards the doorway with the suspicion of a philosopher asked to use a revolving door. You pat the thick neck once, twice, then give the kneeling command in the voice you reserve for delicate pottery and panicked geese. "Kneel, friend." The pads fold, the forelegs bend, the whole ship of the desert docks without complaint, though the face still says, "I acknowledge your request," not "I am thrilled." Joke 1. A camel's love language is acts of service, mostly performed by other people. To your left, a column bears scratches like a traveler's registry of animals. Hamal the Bold, Aldebaran's cousin, Tale of Ursa, names borrowed from the night. Star names help when there are 20 beige attitudes in one courtyard. "Mine's the one named after Orion's belt," someone murmurs, and another replies, "Which buckle?" A fringe tidbit drifts in from a Turfan drover. Some handlers hang tiny copper stars on a headstall, one for each good journey, so the animal jingles a constellation. Whether the practice started as a boast or a memory aid, nobody minds the music. You work the tethers the way you were taught by someone who trusted you to keep knots honest. The front hobble is soft felt, so it doesn't rub. The lead rope loops to a ring sunk into the masonry. The tail rope, Yes, tail rope keeps a known prankster from sidestepping into somebody else's dinner. Historians still argue whether tail ropes were standard along the eastern stretches or a regional fix that spread by complaint. Either way, the person with the pristine water jar is grateful for the extra inch of discipline. Mainstream fact to steady your hands. Along the Silk Roads, traders favored Bactrian camels, the shaggy two-humped kind that treat cold like a suggestion and sand like a snack. Their broad pads learn the stable floor as easily as dunes. Their double humps carry loads balanced like a librarian's dream. You unfasten the side panners in mirror order: grain, cloth, ceramic jars, laying each down like you're setting out a picnic for gravity. The hostler watches, approving when your ropes coil flat and quiet, disapproving when anyone drops a buckle to clatter against stone. Sound etiquette is part of stable etiquette. Loud metal says nerves. Soft rope says we sleep well here. Donkeys blink from a side bay, ears punctuation marks in a paragraph about patience. One is named pea soup, another, for reasons known only to the cosmos, is called the judge. A boy reaches to scratch behind the judge's ear and receives a long, considered look, as if a verdict requires more evidence. Joke 2. Donkeys are the auditors of the stable. Nothing is posted without their review. You shift your camel to give a donkey pair space at the trough. They step forward single file, as if rehearsed by a director who respects hydrology. The water routine starts slow. A watchman tips a skin into the long stone basin, and the trickle sounds like sleep practicing. You don't shove your bridle in first. You wait for the animals who arrived earlier, a calculus worked out by glances and the awareness that thirst makes neighbors testy. The hostler counts quietly, 1, 2, 3, lifting and lowering the dipper so the stream doesn't splash like an argument. Another mainstream detail: many caravanserai set their troughs low and long so multiple animals could drink with less crowding, the stone worn smoother than bargaining. Your camel pushes a whiskered nose toward the surface, blows a bubble that bursts like a polite complaint, and finally drinks. Steam halos the muzzle. You look away not because you're shy, but because eye contact during water time is the emotional equivalent of elbowing at a buffet. Across from you, a Sogdian woman with a red scarf flicks a finger, and her mule pauses obligingly so a foal can edge in. She nods to you, star on her headstall, not on her wrist hood, an entire language in 2 gestures. In the back bay, a jar leans against a post, stoppered with a twist of reed. Somebody whispers about adding a pinch of roasted barley to water to teach it to sit heavier in the stomach. Quirky, yes. Practical, maybe. Delicious, not really. Historians still argue whether such additives were believed to prevent bloat or simply to make animals think dinner arrived early. Either way, the animals seem to accept the placebo with grace. A small blue bead dangles from a camel's brow band, the protective eye, and winks at you in the lantern light, a superstition with excellent color sense. Once your camel has taken the edge off thirst, you guide it away so the smaller mouths can line up. You spread a mat, sliding grain to the front like a quiet buffet, raisins to the side as a change of pace. Yes, you share. Yes, your earlier raisin diplomacy carries weight here. The hostler grins when your camel lips a single raisin with priestly solemnity. Joke 3. You are officially raising raisin standards. Etiquette around loads is almost musical. Heavy things down first, Fragile things up last, a reverse symphony that keeps everyone's ankles and reputations intact. You hand your ceramic jar to the judge's handler with two hands, palms open, showing trust again. He taps the rim, listening for truth. The tone rings clean. Mainstream fact tucked in the rhythm. At many way stations, a shared repair box sits under the eaves, stuffed with offcuts of leather, spare thong, a few bone toggles. No one claims ownership. Everyone contributes. Historians still argue whether these communal kits were a formal policy of the Innkeepers Guild or just the inevitable result of 1,000 tiny crises. As the trough empties and refills, the air warms with animal breath and damp straw. You feel how the stable creates its own weather, a microclimate of patience. You murmur nonsense to your camel, not language but lullaby syllables, and the head lowers, a flag surrendering to sleep. A donkey brays once at conversational volume and then pretends it never happened. The lanterns hiss and settle. The gate's rules, the inked saucer, the lone raisin on the desk, they all seem part of this choreography, small notes that keep the whole piece in tune. You recheck the tethers, 2 fingers slack, always 2, so joints don't stiffen and ropes don't chafe. You set the bucket upside down to keep wandering cats from upgrading their status to splash artists. The hostler lays a hand on your camel's shoulder and gives the approving grunt that passes for a long review in this line of work. Your own shoulders notice the absence of weight, and for a breath you sway like an untethered bell. The animals blink, the water quiets, and the stable exhale becomes your own. Outside, the ledger waits, and so does something that smells like barley and onions. But for a few more heartbeats, you let the night stand still on 4 broad, sleepy feet. You drift from the stables toward the smell that has been patiently spelling your name. Onions coaxed low, barley listening, a ladle whispering circles in a bronze pot. The night opens into the kitchen arcade where the tandoor sits like a friendly planet, its rim glowing, its sides black with a long memory of bread. A baker plants a padded hand against the inner wall, and Thoop slaps a disk of dough that clings, balloons, then freckles. He watches it the way a good parent watches a toddler near puddles. Bread here is less a side dish than a quiet constitution. Etiquette glides ahead of you. Hands wash before mouths work. A girl tips a ewer over your fingers, and the water runs cool as old glass. You lift your damp hands to the warmth of the tandoor mouth, not to dry quickly, but to take the heat as if it were a blessing shared. Mainstream fact. In many caravanserais, guests ate in courtyards or along porticos on low mats, sharing bowls, using the right hand and pieces of bread as spoons, with a basin for rinsing set nearby to keep the common dish truly common. You sit where the host gestures, never dead center, never blocking a servant's path, and you fold your legs the way the mat prefers. Who eats first? Animals already drank, so among people the rule leans toward elders and the road-weary. A gray-bearded guard is nudged to the front. A woman whose scarf tastes faintly of lowest dust is waved to the warm place. Then, as if a bell no one rang has finished ringing, the rest flow in. The stew arrives, barley, chickpeas, onion, a ribbon of mint. It looks like humility and smells like gratitude. A fringe habit surfaces. The cook drops 2 raisins into each bowl and calls them eyes, so the stew can see where it's going. Is it a joke? A charm against spills? Both. The raisins melt into tiny sighs. Before the first bite, the ladle pauses, and a slice of etiquette is set like a bookmark. Praise belongs to the absent. You thank the farmer you'll never meet, the shepherd you only glimpsed, the water you did not have to draw. Historians still argue whether this custom is a Zoroastrian echo of honoring unseen benefactors or simply a kindness honed by long supply chains. Either way, you like the part where gratitude practices being specific. Joke 1 tiptoes in. You quietly thank your own camel for not taste testing the barley en route. The animal, somewhere in the stable, sneezes as if to accept the compliment. Payment tonight is its own choreography. Some caravanserais along endowed routes feed travelers without charge, held up by a charitable foundation. Others set modest prices that cling to the stew like the scent of mint. Here the board shows tokens, little clay discs stamped with a sign, a grape cluster, a crescent, a hand. You exchange a token for a bowl, not coins, because tokens eat arguments. The clerk earlier tucked 2 into your palm with the receipt loop. You slide 1 now to the server's tray and keep 1 for bread because bread gets its own economy. Historians still argue whether token systems reduced cheating or simply made it more creative. The knight, being merciful, keeps its opinion to itself. You practice table charm. You tear bread with quiet hands. You don't fork the communal bowl like you're plowing a field. You dip once and retreat, then talk with your eyes rather than your mouth full. You laugh softly when the guard tells a story about a wolf who learned to count. He assures everyone the wolf now works in taxation. Joke 2. Someone asks if the wolf offers receipts. The guard says yes, but only in howls. Across the mat, a Khotanese weaver shreds her bread into tidy rafts and sets each afloat on stew before carrying it to harbor. It's a method that says, I like structure with my supper. Raisin water arrives in small cups, ma al-zabib to some tongues, cool as a morning well. The raisins were steeped in daylight and strained through cloth until the liquid turned the color of tender brass. Mainstream fact tucked in the lap. Along Islamic lands and their neighbors, non-alcoholic nabidh of fruit and water travels well, a comfort drink that keeps the night soft and the scales honest. You raise the cup and think of the single raisin you left as witness on the desk, still doing its tiny job of peacekeeping. Sip. Sweetness walks in without taking its shoes off. A boy tries to balance 4 loaves on 1 forearm and wobbles like a candle in a breeze. The baker catches the stack with a gentleness that makes everyone's shoulders drop. He stamps each bread with his mark, a simple rosette, to show which oven birthed it. Are those marks about pride, tax, or both? Historians still argue whether such baker stamps functioned as quality control, guild identity, or just a practical way to track whose dough paid for whose fuel. You like that the bread wears a little jewelry either way. You spot a saucer of pickled garlic moons and a dish of crushed herbs cohabiting like quiet neighbors. Do you reach? You do, but you mind the mat's invisible traffic laws. No arms over bowls, no surprise elbows. A turf-on vintner to your right taps 2 fingers to his brow before taking the herb dish, a salute that excuses the borrowing. Quirky tidbit. Some travelers carry a personal pinch spoon carved from bone, not for status, but to share condiments without fingers learning too much about strangers. You have one, thin as a reed, tucked near your belt. When you use it, the weaver grins as if you just pronounced her cousin's name correctly. Who pays for whom is a soft conversation that finishes before it starts. You owe for yourself. You add the watchman to your tally because you liked how he touched the trough without splashing. The woman with dust in her scarf slips a token toward the girl with the ewer, and the guard, as guards do, insists the mint cost nothing, and then pays extra in silence. Joke 3 comes folded into your last crust. You butter it with the proud relief of a person who has never seen butter. The butter is not here, your imagination spreads it anyway. When the bowls tilt empty, you don't scrape the last scrape. You leave a polite crescent on the bottom, a thank you shaped like restraint. The ewer returns, you rinse right hand, then lips, then dry your fingers by the breath of the stove, as if learning again how warmth moves. The baker leans a stack of tomorrow's dough in the cool and covers it with a cloth that smells faintly of sesame. A cat processes through the arcade with the dignity of a tax inspector and sits facing the tandoor like a congregation of one. Bread breaks, night knits, the bowl's eyes close satisfied. You rise quietly as steam leaving the pot, and let the tokens clink once in the server's tray, a sound like the lid of a calm day closing. You follow the steam of bread back toward the gatehouse, where the brazier keeps a red eye open and the ledger table waits like a small stage. Your receipt loop still warms your palm. The clay bead nudges your thumb as if to say, "Sign here, kindly." The clerk has rearranged his tools into a quiet constellation, reed pens sleeping in a cup of sand, a cloth of pumice for smoothing, a knife that shaves quills into obedience, a little horn of soot ink dark as midnight tea. He lifts one pen, taps it twice against the pot, more habit than need, and gestures you closer as if you're about to learn why ink never hurries and always arrives on time. The saucer with its single raisin still sits in the corner, an edible witness holding the room to its promise. Beside it rests a tray of weights and a travel scale whose arms remember arguments. The clerk settles your looped paper on a board thin as a lullaby and begins to write your particulars again, this time in long strokes that lean like reeds by a river. Mainstream fact echoing through the lamplight. The Sogdians left letters all along this road, famously near Dunhuang, paper voices across centuries in which merchants fretted about lost bales and late payments, and, endearingly, who should receive a polite scolding. You watch his lines grow, not quite your alphabet, but close enough that meaning hums under the skin. He pauses to blot, not with sand tonight, but with a sprinkle of ground eggshell that drinks the damp and leaves a pale dusting like frost. Quirky tidbit whispered by the watchman, some clerks mix pomegranate rind into ink to make it stubborn against time. Others stir in gum from desert almonds so the letters sit with better posture. When the clerk shakes his pen, the air smells faintly of fruit and smoke. You resist the modern itch to ask for a printer-friendly version. Joke 1, you also wisely do not ask where the USB port is on the brazier. Now for weights, the other language of trust. He tips a pouch of silver nubs onto a square of cloth and counts them with 2 soft clicks per piece, one for the coin, one for the conscience. The scale lifts its arms, tilts, adjusts, and finally relaxes as if convinced by the argument. Proper weights, the gateboard promised, and proper weights require ceremony. A small stone stamped with a crescent meets a slightly larger stone stamped with a cluster of grapes. The pans agree. Historians still argue whether local standards here leaned towards Sasanian measures, early Islamic dirhams, or a patchwork so precise each courtyard had its own favorite grammar of grams. The clerk, beautifully bored by the debate, simply keeps a set that matches the neighbor's. He slides you a sliver of wood, no longer than your palm, with notches at the edges like a patient smile. Split? He asks. You nod, because you know this trick, the tally stick. He scores today's agreement, not rent, not purchase, just the record of stall space and fodder, then cracks the wood lengthwise, one half for you, one for the ledger chest. Matched grain and matching cuts mean later, if someone forgets or pretends to forget, the truth will marry itself back together in your hands. Mainstream in broad strokes, fringe in this region. Tally sticks are common farther west. Here they appear when the inn favors wood over clay for quick promises. Historians still argue whether their presence on this road signals a fashion drifting in with travelers or just clerks enjoying a satisfying snap. He adds a wax seal to the chest half, lion bore moon again, and warms it at the brazier until the impression softens into an agreeable blur. Your half travels without wax. Your pockets are not a great environment for seals. Joke 2 sticks its head in the door. You sign your name on the wood with all the confidence of a physician, legible mainly to destiny. The clerk pretends not to notice, then writes your name again neatly beside it, thereby saving future you from fighting with present you's handwriting. At the table's edge, a second clerk mutters about paper. He pinches a sample, rubs it, listens. Samarkand? He asks, as if paper has an accent. Mainstream fact folded gently under the pens, Samarkand becomes one of the early centers of papermaking in this part of the world, the craft drifting or racing in after new techniques reach Central Asia. Historians still argue whether the oft-told story about a single battle turning prisoners into papermakers is tidy myth or useful shorthand for a slower exchange of skills. Either way, tonight's sheet feels sturdy and forgiving, like a friendly mat. Your receipt loop gets its own flourish. The clerk lifts a small bottle and flicks 2 dots of rose water onto the knot. So the account remembers to behave, he says, half joke, half charm. Quirky, yes, but the scent will also keep the more curious cats from practicing literacy upon your paperwork. His ring goes to the ink again, then onto the margin of your loop, pressing the lion-boar moon into a corner where it can glare at anyone tempted to edit. A merchant from Merv leans in with a stack of parchment scraps covered in numbers so round they look like coins. He and the clerk discuss proper tear, the weight of sacks, cords, sticks, because nobody wants to pay for the privilege of carrying their own packaging. The scale squeaks as if it too wants to negotiate. The clerk oils the hinge with a touch of sesame, and suddenly even the balance sounds satisfied. Joke 3 glides by. You imagine a court case where the judge calls the scale as a witness. Do you swear to weigh the whole truth and nothing but the truth? The scale nods, gravely, in perfect equilibrium. Your name, goods, animals, tokens, stall, water, and the tiny goodwill represented by the saucer raisin, all of it now lives in soft ink on calm paper and in the matching smile of your half-stick. The clerk dries the last curl of script over the brazier and hands the loop back like a bracelet of confidence. He adds a whisper, almost ritual. May your ink never run. You answer by tapping your pocket where the raisin pouch sleeps, a callback the whole table seems to understand. Fruit began the conversation, ink closes it. Trust threads between them like twine through a bale. He tugs open a drawer and shows you the inn's archive. Rolled slips tied with colored thread stacked like a garden of scrolls. Red for animals, blue for rooms, brown for road warden fees. If you stayed here every month for a year, your name would line up in orderly blossoms. You picture that, an herbarium of journeys, a botany of receipts, and feel oddly soothed. The brazier sighs. Outside, a bell counts the hour with the calm of someone who knows the weights, the measures, and the quiet arithmetic of a good night. The brazier sighs and the courtyard wrinkles itself into bedtime, but business isn't done until the night learns your name, in ink and in whispers. Protection here is not a dramatic sword at midnight, it's a civics lesson with lanterns. A narrow table appears near the gate, and the watch captain arrives with a ledger thinner than your patience and a kindness thicker than the walls. He looks like every road you ever worried about, now wearing a wool cap. You recognize the rhythm. Donations first, duties second, sleep third. Not a tax, not exactly a tip, something in between, a gentle oil that keeps hinges from squeaking. The captain turns the wick on his lamp until the flame behaves like a well-trained cat. He slides a wooden tray forward, 2 slots for coins, 1 slot for tokens, and a small bowl labeled by the universe, if not by paint, tea money. You place a pair of modest dirhams into the left slot and a bread token into the right. Your fingers hover over the bowl, then drop a coin there too, because you didn't come all this way to underpay the stars. Mainstream fact to anchor the scene. Caravans routinely paid tolls or passage fees at bridges, city gates, and mountain passes across Central Asia, and caravanserais often coordinated escorts or nighttime watches to reduce the sort of excitement no one sleeps through. These payments weren't always governmental. Sometimes they were community-run, sometimes guild-managed, sometimes just the road's version of neighborly insurance. The captain's clerk, yes, another clerk, this road grows them like time, writes your name again, the number of animals tethered under your personal weather system, and the bell at which you'd like to be woken. The list unfolds down the page like a soft staircase. Gate walk, roof walk, stable patrol, cistern watch, market wing, perimeter. Next to each task he writes 2 names so that no one's bravery has to travel alone. 2 eyes, 4 ears, he says, tapping the paper, and a bell. He gestures to a row of handbells that sound like different kinds of rain when you test them. You pick one that says drizzle, not thunder. Etiquette note: if you must wake a sleeping world, do it with weather, not alarms. Road wardens, you ask, and the captain tilts his head toward a little alcove where 3 men share a pot of tea and the relaxed posture of people who can run in sandals. He explains that tomorrow a pair will ride with any caravan that wants company out of the low pass, the stretch where the wind edits tracks and bandits try to edit ledgers. The fee is posted. Also posted, the promise that anyone paying for a guard receives a clay bead stamped with the inn's sign to hang from the lead camel. The bead isn't armor, but it is a conversation, an agreement visible from a distance. Historians still argue whether such escorts were standardized by local rulers, farmed out to toll farmers, or organized informally by innkeepers who understood both risk and marketing. The captain, uninterested in theory, counts out the beads. A merchant from Merv clears his throat, and with the solemnity of a man ordering furniture, purchases the roof and gate package, which includes extra oil for lanterns and a cup of coffee for the last patrol before dawn. You smile because yes, of course there's a package. Your own contribution stays modest, a beam of light and 2 circuits of the stable at the second bell. Your camel, hearing its name in the ledger without permission, sneezes from across the courtyard. Joke 1. You ask whether the animal can volunteer as additional security. The captain says only if it agrees to wear the bell and not eat it. Quirky tidbit passed down like a spice blend. Some old hands sprinkle a thin ring of dry chickpeas around their sleeping bundle. If anyone toes the line in the dark, the chickpeas click and roll, tattling like tiny, honest marbles. The captain approves. Low-tech, high integrity. He also recommends pinning a strip of indigo cloth on your outermost wrap. Supposedly, the blue discourages moths and, less scientifically, discourages thieves who dislike dye fingers. You nod, remembering the blue that could stop a priest mid-blessing. You're not wasting it on moths, but a sliver for luck seems fine. He reaches for a drawer and produces paper slips headed Night List. The paper smells faintly of starch and rose, your earlier clerk's signature family scent, and each slip gets a seal. Lion Boar Moon again, softer this time, as if yawning. Your name, your bell, your path. He tears the bottom into a fringe to show it's temporary. At dawn, the fringe will match the stub in the file and mark your duty done. You tuck the slip in your belt where the tally stick rests, your pockets accumulating obligations like calm little pets. You ask, because the thought has been nibbling your curiosity, where the money goes after the tea steeps and the ink dries. The captain lists it gently: lamp oil, straw, patching the cistern steps, paying the widow who mends the gate curtain, buying salt for the trough, replacing a bell that ran away, and he smiles, the occasional celebratory fig cake when a caravan returns intact. Mainstream note folded under the warmth. Many inns along endowed routes drew on charitable foundations to cover essentials. Where no waqf or local endowment existed, traveler contributions kept the light literal. Historians still argue whether such funds were tracked by formal guild rules, by religious overseers, or by the captain's notebook plus an excellent memory. A hush circles the table as a stranger drops a heavy coin with the gravity of a comet. The captain doesn't flinch. He divides it, some here, some there, writes 2 numbers, then offers the man exactly the same warm nod you received for your smaller coin. Status burns quickly in this climate. Respect is the cooler flame. Joke 2. You consider asking whether the comet coin includes a complimentary lullaby. Decide against it, hum one anyway. The watch lists start to live. The roof pair fetch their cloaks, bells tucked like birds' eggs into their hands. The stable patrol reviews names, the judge, Aldebaran's cousin, and agrees on a quiet route that won't startle a foal into a philosophy career. A boy volunteers to sit by the cistern with a hooked pole, not as a weapon, but as a persuasion stick for any jar that has ambitions towards breakage. The captain assigns a final tender job, someone to walk 2 loops just outside the wall, kicking gently at the dust to confuse anyone reading tracks at dawn. You volunteer for 1 loop. The desert, you think, already knows your handwriting. He finishes by taking a lump of soft clay and pressing the inn sign into a small plaque that hangs by the gate. Today's date, today's pledge. The plaque will bake itself by morning sun into a mild record no one can argue with. He pats it once, fond, then closes the drawer on the coins like a parent tucking in argumentative children. Joke 3, he tells them to grow up into lamp oil and good choices. You step back, your slip crinkling softly against the tally stick. The lion-boar moon on the paper winks at the raisin left hours ago, and you realize this is the same conversation in another dialect. Sweetness, ink, and agreed-upon quiet. You pass the tea bowl back toward the captain, who refuses with a palm. He'll drink later, alone, when the list is just footsteps. For now, he says, the road is sleeping. Your job is to keep it dreaming of safe returns. Steam curls from an arch like a cat deciding whether to enter, and you slip your sandals off where the floor cools from sun-baked to lantern-warm. The wash house here is modest. A stone basin, a copper ewer, a low bench rubbed smooth by travelers who discovered long ago that dust may be romantic at a distance but turns less poetic behind the ears. You ladle water with your left hand and pour over your right, then switch, because the road has rules about which hand washes and which hand waves. The etiquette is unprinted, but enforced by 1,000 approving nods. Don't splash, don't sing unless you can whisper the tune, and please do not attempt to launder your entire personality tonight. A bowl of ash soap squats like a gray moon near the basin. You pinch a bit and feel its soft grit teach your skin to breathe again. Quirky tidbit, small as a raisin but twice as useful. Some inns add pomegranate peel to the wash water to tighten the skin and perfume the steam. Others toss in a thread of saffron for luck on the next leg. Too little to stain, just enough to let the scent imagine its sunrise. You rub along your wrists and neck, hear your joints sigh like barn doors oiled, and remember how earlier you warmed wet fingers at the tent-door mouth. The same choreography, fire and water taking turns telling your body it belongs here. On the far wall, a row of pegs holds towels the size of confident scarves. Joke 1 pads in. You wrap one and look like philosophy major meets burrito. No matter. Your elbow finds a niche and rests there, becoming briefly architectural. A boy with a bucket steps around you on silent feet and tips water into the basin with the respect of a scribe adding one more careful line to a page. Across the doorway, a small prayer alcove breathes its own weather. You keep a gentle distance because the space holds many directions at once. A Sogdian man loosens his kusti, the sacred cord, and reties it with practiced murmured prayers, facing the little travel lamp a cousin lit before sundown. Mainstream fact, many Sogdians identified as Zoroastrian, tending to a symbolic flame and reciting from the Avesta even as they traded across Buddhist and Christian lands. The lamp is not a temple fire, it's a privately tended brightness, a reminder that truth likes to wear light. Historians still argue whether caravanserais deliberately set aside such multi-faith niches inside the walls, or whether most devotions unfolded just beyond a gate, under the friendlier jurisdiction of stars. Tonight, the alcove tucks itself into the building like a heartbeat, and everyone behaves as if that's always been enough. A monk in travel-stained saffron steps in with a mala, the beads sliding like soft abacus clicks. He sits, turns the little hand wheel you almost don't notice, thin brass, polite as a teaspoon, and lets its quiet rotation preach patience. On the other side, a Christian trader, cross-cut into a wooden token on his belt, the simple kind that leaves a comforting dent in the palm, traces a sign toward the east and lowers his head. Mainstream fact folded into the hush, Nestorian, Church of the East, communities reached deep into Central Asia by the early medieval period. Carved crosses and stelae as far as Chang'an whisper that traders carried more than textiles. This room knows that. The three of them breathe from different scripts into the same small silence, and you, dusty and newly rinsed, learn the first law of shared sanctuaries. Your gaze knows how to bow. A little placard over the alcove asks for simple kindnesses without choosing sides. Remove shoes, keep flame high and sleeves higher, wait for the other sentence to finish its thought. You've stood at scales, signed a tally stick, paid tea money to keep bells polite. This is the same contract sung softer. Joke 2. You suddenly imagine a separate ledger for prayers with the lion boar moon stamping answered, pending, and let's revisit next season. You decide the universe already keeps better books than we do. You rinse again, slower now. Your hands remember the herb dish you borrowed earlier, the raisin eyes in your stew, the way the saucer at the desk became a social receipt. The same logic works here. A minute of quiet paid in, a long hour of quiet paid out. The monk finishes first, rises with the particular sigh of someone who has negotiated with both dust and desire all day, and gestures that you may share the bench. You sit where his warmth lingers like a small, kind ghost. In a side niche, a jar of sesame oil waits with a plucked sprig of dill floating like a tiny green feather. An old traveler dabs a thumb and slicks his beard into cooperation. Keeps the wind from inventing new faces for me, he says. Ashore in your own reflection, a wavering oval on a polished copper tray, you smooth eyebrows that lost their map earlier in the pass. Historians still argue whether oils were rationed at inns or brought by guests and pooled. Tonight you see a little chalk mark on the jar's neck and suspect the clerk's rose-scented pen knows exactly how generosity circulates. On the far side of the alcove, small negotiations continue. Two women trade places so each can face the direction she wants. A boy sets down his bucket and learns that the quietest way to enter the room is to put one foot into stillness and wait for the whole body to follow. You discover another cross-faith courtesy. Do not step between worshiper and lamp, monk and wheel, trader and east. The rule is practical as furniture. Be where shadows don't argue. You pat your pouch, 2 raisins remain, ceremonial by now, and leave one on the peg as a thanks to the room. Joke 3 waves from the doorway. If raisins are the gold of good manners, this is your tithe to the empire of calm. The peg accepts with dignity. You retie your scarf, remembering to shake only a shy cloud of dust, and your sandals find your feet with that grateful little slap that says the road can wait its turn. Before you go, the Zoroastrian lifts his lamp a fraction, blessing not so much you as the air you'll walk through. The monk nods as if he's been quietly expecting your next step, and the Christian folds you into the corner of his smile like a name written small and safe at the bottom of a page. Mainstream reality hums beneath the tenderness. Along these roads, mixed prayer was less a committee and more a habit. Everyone carried their sky with them. Everyone learned the choreography of not bumping someone else's heaven. Whether this exact alcove existed or lived just beyond the gate, you leave with the same feeling you brought to the ledger and the stew. The world works, at least tonight, because small courtesies hold its corners down. You step back into the portico. The night has grown gentle around the cistern. A bell in drizzle mode pings from the roof. The judge clears his throat in the stable and chooses not to file a report. Your skin cools. Your mind, washed like your hands, flips its sign from crowded to vacancy. You walk on lighter soles, carrying the smell of dill and sesame, the echo of different prayers agreeing on silence, and the quiet certainty that rest, like all good economies, improves with interest the more you pay into it. You follow the braid of voices toward the market wing, where lamps float like patient fruit, and the air tastes of cumin, lamp oil, and the shy metal scent of coins explaining themselves. Night here doesn't sleep. It negotiates a softer rate. The first stall breathes silver. A money changer with eyebrows like parenthesis spreads his tools. A palm-sized balance, a strip of black touchstone slick from 100 cautious streaks. A sachet of tiny weights stamped with moons and grapes. And, because style matters, a lodestone that naps on a ribbon like a tame star. He greets you with the sigh of a mathematician and taps the pan as if waking a bird. Mainstream fact to set the table: on these routes, you juggle Sasanian drachs and early Islamic dirhams, copper cash from Chinese mints with square hearts, and local issues that swear they weigh what they weigh. Money changers knit them into credible equivalences so the stew stays priced and tomorrow's straw gets bought. You place 2 coins and a question. You need small change for bread, lamp oil, and a story you've been eyeing. He strokes 1 coin on the touchstone. The streak glows pale, honest, like moonlight agreeing to be weighed. For silver, the ring is half the test. He pings your 2nd coin and listens. The sound lands between drizzle and bell, good enough for the trough. Quirky tidbit he shares with a tilt of the head. Some changers thread a knotted cord around their belt, 1 knot per rate that day, so fingers remember even when ears drown in song. He flicks 2 knots, names 2 numbers, and your palm receives thin coins like sleeping fish. You lean back, letting the market's pulse settle around you. A man fans copper cash through his fingers. Another stamps a receipt scrap with a seal that looks suspiciously like a lazy goat. You smile because the lion-boar moon on your own slip seems to raise an eyebrow at the goat, as if guilds can flirt. Historians still argue whether caravanserais employed official, guild-bound money changers or simply hosted freelancers whose best credential was the line of people willing to be weighed by their scale. Tonight, the queue behaves like belief. Etiquette patrols even here, softer than the bell. You don't haggle the rate like you're inventing arithmetic. You ask for the posted numbers and save your bargaining for carpets and cumin. You keep your voice at reed fence height so the stall next door can still hear its thoughts. And when the changer pings a coin you offered and the ring sounds dull as wet bread, you wince and say, "Let's call that one tired." Not fake, because whoever passed it to you might be within earshot, and because money is the most sensitive gossip in any courtyard. Joke 1 rests its chin on the scales. You briefly consider asking for the friends and family rate, decide you have neither friends nor family in this ledger, and pay in the universal currency of not being annoying. Beyond the coin murmur, the storyteller's corner lifts its own roof of breath. A reed mat sags under two boys who already know the ending and love it anyway. The teller sits with his back to a pillar painted with vines, voice so low you have to lean in, a slow river you're content to float. His hands sketch mountains and passes, a snow leopard whose tail is a scarf, a horse who refuses destiny until destiny bribes it with dates. Mainstream fact woven into the hush. Tales from the Shah Nama travel well here, as do Alexander romances and Buddhist jatakas. The Panjikent murals you thought of earlier don't just show banquets. Many scholars see musicians and storytellers there too, proof that commerce and narrative share wall space. You collect a raisin from your pouch, ritual now, and drop it into the wooden bowl at his feet. Sweetness for speech. His jokes fall in the safe lanes of a well-marked road. Weather that refuses to read forecasts. Camels that demand better union contracts. A king who tries to tax laughter and discovers it escapes through windows. Etiquette draws a discreet border. You don't haggle the rate like you're inventing arithmetic. You ask for the posted numbers and save your bargaining for carpets and cumin. You keep your voice at reed fence height so the stall next door can still hear its thoughts. And when the changer pings a coin you offered and the ring sounds dull as wet bread, you wince and say, "Let's call that one tired." Not fake, because whoever passed it to you might be within earshot, and because money is the most sensitive gossip in any courtyard. Joke 2 pads in softly when he describes a donkey who refuses to cross a bridge until someone carries its dignity first. You glance toward the stable and imagine the judge carefully setting down his dignity before walking daintily over a plank. The money changer drifts over with a cup of raisin water and a face that says he's heard this story a dozen times in 3 languages and still wants to see how tonight's version lands. Rumors and news braid into the tale, the way herbs braid into stew. The pass after the salt lick grew windier, someone offers. Someone saw red dye near the wadi, another whispers, meaning cochineal sellers must be near. Your cloth merchant's mind hums. A monk adds that a new scribe in the city writes with a slant that makes every line look like it's napping. Useful to know if you're hiring or hoping for awake documents. The teller raises a hand when rumor wants to gallop. His palm says, "Walk, don't run." Historians still argue whether caravanserais served as formal news hubs or simply accidental newspapers with comfortable mats and good acoustics. Either way, tonight's front page has camel breath in the margins and a nice aftertaste of mint. A man with a box of glass beads lets them pool into his lap, river blue, apricot, smoky quartz, and invites your eyes to float. You ask quietly whether they traveled from far west furnaces or farther east kilns. He says, yes, which is the Silk Road answer to many questions. He shows you a trick. Breathe on a bead and watch the fog clear slightly slower if the glass is thicker. Practical? Barely. Mesmerizing? Completely. Quirky mini ritual. He taps 3 beads together to wake their shine, then offers you a small, imperfect orb as a traveler's charm against boredom. You accept because boredom is the only thief on this road you're happy to starve. The storyteller pauses to sip, and the silence goes on telling for him. In that quiet, the money changer folds a paper triangle and tucks it under his scale. For luck, he murmurs. You think of the raisin left on the desk hours ago, still performing witness duty. Objects at this inn don't just sit, they keep the temperature of goodwill steady. Joke 3 strolls by when a child claps at the wrong moment and the teller bows as if that was precisely where the tale wanted applause all along. The child beams, promoted to co-author. You ease back from the circle, small change cooler in your palm, the bead a rounding error of color in a night of browns and silvers. The market wing sighs a satisfied, many-voiced sigh. Someone starts a song with more rests than notes. Someone answers with a clapped rhythm that respects the hour. You catch the captain's roof pair passing above, bells set to drizzle. Etiquette once again proves itself to be a technology that keeps coins honest, stories breathable, and the rumor mill from grinding teeth. As you turn toward the open courtyard, you feel the market's murmur settle into your bones like a blanket of low voices. Somewhere, the judge resettles straw with magisterial authority, as if stamping the night's proceedings, approved. You tuck the bead, the coins, and one last raisin into your pouch and carry the news as softly as a lamp. You tilt your face toward the roof of the courtyard, where the night unrolls like careful cloth, and the stars sew themselves to it with needles of cold light. The roof pair pass above with drizzle bells, and you follow their route only as far as the gate. Beyond it, the sky keeps the longer map. Orion climbs the eastern wall with the calm of an experienced porter. The 3 belt stars point like courteous ushers toward your next day's pass. You set your feet by their suggestion, even though you're not walking yet. Bodies listen better when you teach them the road while they're standing still. A low wind limbers itself along the wall, testing the scent of straw and mint. You lean into it as if into conversation. In a place where sand edits footprints and the sun edits plans, wind is both gossip and guide. Mainstream fact to hang on the first bright nail. Caravans across Central Asia often used stellar bearings, Polaris for north, the Big Dipper as a pointer, familiar asterisms rising at known hours to judge direction, and reckon distance in parasangs, the Persian farsak, a measure that rides the tongue like a slow drumbeat of miles. You whisper the old marcher's math, 3 parasangs per hour if the camels are optimistic, 2 if the judge holds a meeting, and the wind agrees in principle while declining to sign anything. Your pocket remembers the glass bead from the market wing. You hold it up so the bead catches a star. The light sits inside like a promise. Quirky habit a Turfan drover taught you years ago. Carry 1 small bead as a sky check. If the bead refuses to hold a star, the air is too dusty for night navigation. Sleep wins the argument. You tip the bead, the star blinks and returns, as if the sky can't resist a mirror. Joke 1 ruffles your scarf. You try the bead trick on your camel's eye. The camel, an optometrist of zero patience, blinks you into a better idea. A low boy from the roof patrol points to the north, where a modest star plays chaperone to the wheel of the heavens. Polaris doesn't sit exactly on the world's hinge in this century, but it's close enough to be a lazy compass. The boy learned to find it by following the dipper's rim stars like footsteps to a door, an old lesson in a short body. You show him Orion's outstretched arm and how, when the belt rises to a certain angle, you'll meet the river by mid-morning. Historians still argue whether caravans preferred to travel more by night for cool or more by day for safety, and whose preference ruled, the camels or the captain's. Tonight you will leave in the first lace of dawn, cool enough for hooves, bright enough for stories to see where they dropped their next line. The breeze stiffens, and you name it by texture. Not the winter knife called buran, not the hot sigh that peels paint from an idea, but a middle wind, steady enough to press cloth and remind you which side is east without squinting. Traders have wind roses in their heads long before there are roses on charts. You think of the paper triangle the money changer tucked under his scale for luck. You fold your own palm into one and feel the air push it toward the pass. Joke 2 wanders in like a polite stray. You consult the night as if it were a receptionist. The night pretends to check a ledger and points you toward tomorrow. You pace the yard in a slow square, teaching your legs the unit you prefer. One courtyard equals one song hummed to yourself the length of a simple psalm, or the time it takes to remember where you packed the extra leather thongs. Distance at scale is just distance multiplied by patience. A seasoned handler clicks a knotted cord as she walks, 1 knot per 100 paces, which keeps mind and sand on speaking terms. Fringe tidbit she shares without breaking stride. Some caravans count in chews, not steps, because camels chew at a wildly reliable rhythm when content. This system fails under 3 conditions, she says dryly: if the camel is offended, if the camel is asleep, or if the camel is both, which you assure her is statistically frequent. You glance at the lion-boar moon on your night list, still tucked by your belt. The seal's round face looks like a planet with opinions. You mark your chosen dawn by the star's position against the gate arch. The second patrol rings drizzle and vanishes into footnotes. Mainstream fact taking another seat at the low table. Along these roads, guides often memorized waybooks, oral or written, that tied features to hours, wells to constellations, passes to rising signs. Historians still argue whether written itineraries circulated widely among Sogdian merchants or remained mostly in the mouths of elders whose memories were as annotated as ledgers. Your own memory prefers scent and sound. You archive tonight in cumin, ash soap, and the bell that sounds like a cat's tail twitching in its sleep. The wind drops, and with it, the yard's little noises return. Rope creak, jars settle, a yawn saved for just such a quiet. Above the east wall, the Milky Way pours a pale stripe, a road of its own. You remember what the storyteller said about a king who taxed laughter. You imagine him trying to tax starlight and being paid in metaphors. Joke 3 smiles itself to sleep. You consider Orion for the navigation advice, decide the constellation's accounting department is star-crossed. A guard pads up beside you and hands over a handful of dry grass. Compass, he says, and drops a blade on the ground. The breeze nudges it northeast-ish, good enough for the courtyard. He claims an old herdsman taught him to watch which side of a bush gathers dust first. The bush apparently does unpaid meteorology. Quirky, yes, and the kind of small science that makes empires possible without getting its name on a coin. You check the parasangs again in your head. The pass is 2 and a bit. The descent into the green wadi, gentle if the wind is with you, argumentative if not. You promise yourself an extra raisin at the halfway cairn, already a tradition, already your camel's favorite policy, and you picture the cairn's flat stone, someone's ledger without ink, where you will set the raisin for luck before you eat it for energy, a microeconomy of sweetness and superstition. You tuck the glass bead back into your pouch with the coins that sound like drizzle when they shift, and the bead settles where it can keep an eye on your better intentions. The courtyard gate breathes again as the roof pair pass, bells soft. You draw a line from the dipper through Polaris down the arch, a private plumb. The world doesn't answer questions loudly tonight. It nods. Your hands rest where rains will sit in a few hours. The wind writes a calm sentence across your scarf and signs it with the patient hand of someone who has watched 1,000 caravans make the same promise to morning. You make it too, to no one in particular and to everything that cares. Walk steady, drink early, read the sky like polite mail, and arrive with just enough brag in your pocket to tell the next courtyard how you recognized the pass-by-the-way Orion leaned his elbow on dawn. Lamplight collects in a shallow bowl on the ledger table, and the market's murmur narrows to the soft arithmetic of two people pretending not to like each other's prices, while liking each other's company. You set your bundle near the scale, never on the clerk's documents, never where it can elbow the tea, and ease onto the cushion as if joining a conversation mid-sentence. Bargains here don't begin, they resume, as though every coin you have ever held is meeting its cousins for a reunion. The tea arrives in porcelain the color of patient clouds, and steam writes a subtitle neither of you will read aloud. Let the first number be kind. You start with the compliment, because nobody has ever lost money by praising cloth. That blue, the one priests pause for, finds its proper audience. Your counterpart, a merchant with fingers inked from too many lists, ducks the flattery and strokes the selvage anyway. Mainstream fact to ground your smile. Textiles and dyes, especially indigo and madder, ran like sturdy threads through Sogdian trade. Contracts name weights, measures, and colors, and Sogdian letters fret cheerfully about who owes whom, how many pieces of cloth, and why the last bale looked at the sun too long. He lifts the steel yard, a traveler's scale with a sliding weight, and the beam levels like a sentence reaching its period. You like honest beams. They spare you eloquence. You offer your number as if laying down a harmless pet. He counters with a figure that stretches, yawns, and owns the cushion. Etiquette keeps both animals from biting. You sip, and the tea negotiates for you. One more exhale buys you a handful of beets, enough to count parasangs to the next well and back. Joke one pads over with its tail in the air. Your eyebrows attempt a second counteroffer without your permission. You recall them to order and let the words do the work. He taps the lion boar moon on your receipt loop, a reminder that you are known here, that your name arrived earlier dressed in ink and courtesy. For neighbors, he says, trimming 5 coins from his number. You trim 3 from yours and open your hands in a gesture that can mean either "this is me being reasonable," or "please admire the emptiness of my purse." He admires, because we are all art critics at a bargain table. A quirky tidbit lives in the next move. He slides one raisin from a saucer to the edge of the scale pan and says, "For sweetness," as if a fruit could argue with gravity. No one believes the raisin matters. Everyone behaves as if it does. He lifts it off before weighing, a charm performed correctly so the math can keep a straight face. Words do their slow weaving. You try a proverb when numbers stall. A road is long, but a promise is longer. He answers with, "A cheap rope breaks in a rich man's hand," which might be a price, a threat, or a compliment to your knots. Historians still argue whether such bargaining proverbs traveled with Sogdian as a portable etiquette or popped up independently in every market where humans tried to make math charming. Either way, the air grows easier when sentences wear hand-me-down wisdom. He moves to the scale again, sets a known weight, grape-stamped, your favorite kind of coincidence, and lays a measure of your cloth across the arm. The beam thinks, then agrees. You watch for the little cheats, the thumb's secret, the lean disguised as admiration. The knot at the cloth's end thickened to steal a finger width. None appear. This courtyard has manners. Mainstream detail stitched into the scene. Posted weights were a public promise across market cultures. Inspectors existed, in theory or in sandals, to scold a scale that forgot its oath. Tonight, the only inspector is the watch captain's bell, now raining softly somewhere above. He asks gently whether the blue holds after washing, or only until the first poem. You answer with the truth your hands can vouch for. 3 rinses, no sulking, no dramatic departures. He sniffs, not at you, at the die, and nods with the satisfied look of a man who hopes his customers dislike surprises. A brief detour into friendship happens. He compliments your knot work, you admire his quill knife. Then both of you remember money and apologize to the tea for leaving it out of the last 5 lines. There is a phrase in your mouth you have been saving. Neighbor's right. You do not wield it like a weapon. You hold it like a bread token. Neighbor's right means a price that lets you pass each other tomorrow without averting eyes. He repeats it, tasting the reasonable syllables, then runs a finger along the selvage again, and finds a thread that misbehaves, barely. He claims a small discount for the thread's personality. You grant it because pride is expensive, and this thread will not feed your camel. Joke 2 changes seats. You consider promising to embroider an apology into every misbehaving thread. Decide humor's best work is invisible. The clay bead for tomorrow's escort sits on the table, patient as a punctuation mark. You slide it toward your receipt loop, letting the 2 stamped faces get acquainted. He notices and trims a final coin, for your road being correctly supervised. A tiny bow to the captain's ledger, which somehow shows up to bless bargains it did not attend. The money changer from earlier drifts by and pretends not to listen. His touchstone, sleeping in his pocket, dreams of honest streaks. When the number finally sighs into place, you don't pounce on it. You let the quiet hold it up, the way 2 hands cup a moth. He writes on a scrap, your name, goods, the price translated into tomorrow's regret, and you add your mark, which looks halfway between a confident signature and a decorative river. He sands the ink with eggshell, blows it dry, and folds the paper into a triangle you recognize. Luck for the scale, luck for the road, luck for the bargain that didn't bruise anyone's pride. Mainstream note settling its showl. Triangle folds travel with paper through these regions, part practicality, part superstition, completely competent at keeping corners from misbehaving in saddlebags. For the exit, etiquette hands you a small script. You stand before your feet, announce it. You don't tuck the money in your belt like a victory. You repraise something small, the straightness of his steelyard, the courtesy of his kiln blue cup, and you offer a final raisin to the saucer, not as payment, but as punctuation. He mirrors you, drops a raisin from his side into the same saucer so sweetness doesn't argue. Lamplight collects in a shallow bowl on the ledger table, and the market's murmur narrows to the soft arithmetic of two people pretending not to like each other's prices while liking each other's company. You set your bundle near the scale, never on the clerk's documents, never where it can elbow the tea, and ease onto the cushion as if joining a conversation mid-sentence. Bargains here don't begin, they resume, as though every coin you have ever held is meeting its cousins for a reunion. The tea arrives in porcelain, the color of patient clouds, and steam writes a subtitle neither of you will read out loud. Let the first number be kind. You start with the compliment, because nobody has ever lost money by praising cloth. That blue, the one priests pause for, finds its proper audience. Your counterpart, a merchant with fingers inked from too many lists, ducks the flattery and strokes the selvage anyway. Mainstream fact to ground your smile, textiles and dyes, especially indigo and madder, ran like sturdy threads through Sogdian trade. Contracts name weights, measures, and colors, and Sogdian letters fret cheerfully about who owes whom how many pieces of cloth and why the last bale looked at the sun too long. He lifts the steel yard, a traveler's scale with a sliding weight, and the beam levels like a sentence reaching its period. You like honest beams. They spare you eloquence. You offer your number, as if laying down a harmless pet. He counters with a figure that stretches, yawns, and owns the cushion. Etiquette keeps both animals from biting. You sip, and the tea negotiates for you. One more exhale buys you a handful of beets, enough to count parasangs to the next well and back. Joke one pads over with its tail in the air. Your eyebrows attempt a second counteroffer without your permission. You recall them to order and let the words do the work. He taps the lion-boar moon on your receipt loop, a reminder that you are known here, that your name arrived earlier, dressed in ink and courtesy. For neighbors, he says, trimming 5 coins from his number. You trim 3 from yours and open your hands in a gesture that can mean either, "This is me being reasonable," or "Please admire the emptiness of my purse." He admires, because we are all art critics at a bargain table. A quirky tidbit lives in the next move. He slides 1 raisin from a saucer to the edge of the scale pan and says, "For sweetness," as if a fruit could argue with gravity. No one believes the raisin matters. Everyone behaves as if it does. He lifts it off before weighing, a charm performed correctly so the math can keep a straight face. Words do their slow weaving. You try a proverb when numbers stall. A road is long, but a promise is longer. He answers with, "A cheap rope breaks in a rich man's hand," which might be a price, a threat, or a compliment to your knots. Historians still argue whether such bargaining proverbs traveled with Sogdian as a portable etiquette or popped up independently in every market where humans tried to make math charming. Either way, the air grows easier when sentences wear hand-me-down wisdom. He moves to the scale again, sets a known weight, grape-stamped, your favorite kind of coincidence, and lays a measure of your cloth across the arm. The beam thinks, then agrees. You watch for the little cheats, the thumb's secret, the lean disguised as admiration, the knot at the cloth's end thickened to... You wake when the courtyard is still a held breath, the sky a shade between slate and promise, and the drizzle bell, somewhere above, writes a single, careful comma into the dark. This is the hour when trade turns into craft. No haggling, no ledgers, just hands remembering what to do. You walk toward the eaves where the communal tool chest lives, the one you heard about earlier, a democracy of alls and offcuts, and find it already awake. A lamp crouches beside it, and moths circle as if considering a career in leatherwork. The hostler nods you into the circle that isn't a circle. Everyone faces their own small disaster and pretends it's a hobby. Your camel's girth lies across your knees like a tired serpent. Felt padding has thinned where the buckle kisses it. You can hear tomorrow's chafe complaining in the future tense. You work a palmful of beeswax into the linen thread, warm it until it smells like honey, remembering flowers, and thread the blunt awl. Mainstream fact sliding comfortably into place. Caravans on this road swore by felt, under pack saddles, on backs, as pads beneath girths, because wool's matted patience spread pressure and forgave bad angles. You lift the girth, lay a leather patch, and use a sailmaker's stitch you learned from a man who could sew while walking. The hostler watches your fingers travel the curve, approves your spacing, and offers a trick. Chalk on your fingertips for grip. Chalk on the wax so the stitch remembers where it has been. The line neatens like a thought finding its words. A woman with the red scarf, your mule's neighbor from the trough, turns a sandal over and displays a hole where optimism used to be. She cuts an oval from an old camel collar, punches 2 neat rows with a thorn awl, and laces the patch with palm fiber thread. Let the knot sit where your foot forgets it, she murmurs, and you nod, newly aware that your feet have opinions. Quirky tidbit that makes the circle murmur. Someone swears by wet rawhide as a miracle bandage. Lash it around a cracked strap, and as it dries, it shrinks into a custom fit that a tailor would applaud and a philosopher would call destiny. Historians still argue whether rawhide fixes were daily wisdom along the eastern stretches or an imported trick travelers bragged about until it became local common sense. You tuck the method into the pocket of your mind where good gossip lives. Beside you, a jar sits on a folded scrap of blanket, cracked from neck to shoulder like a frown interrupted. You owe that jar 3 days of raisins and a lifetime of water. You cannot afford to let it sulk. The courtyard's repair rhetoric offers 2 paths. First, the field fix. Warm pitch, if you have it, bitumen if the road gifts you ancient geology, dabbed inside the wound and massaged until it decides to be a membrane. Second, the long fix. Drill paired holes straddling the fracture and staple with soft metal, then seal the line with resin. No one is starting a metallurgy project before dawn, so you pour a ribbon of softened pitch from a tiny pot that smells like forest and thyme. It pools, glistens, sighs, and agrees to hold. A copper coin plays washer under a thong looped round the neck. Suddenly the jar looks as if it is joined at guild. Your camel chews thoughtfully on absence. You take this as encouragement and move to the pannier chords where frayed ends audition for dramaturgy. You trim, singe, twist, and rub with beeswax until the fibers behave like citizens. Mainstream reality tucked beneath the waxy hush, pack saddles on Bactrian camels, wooden frames padded with layered felt, depend on symmetrical loading and honest chords, or tomorrow's mile becomes a seminar in gravity. You mark each bundle with a simple tag, 1 dot for left, 2 dots for right. so your sleepy self won't invent new arithmetic at dawn. Joke 1 stands behind your shoulder and clears its throat. You briefly consider labeling them leftish and rightish, decide the road has enough philosophy, and go with dots. Under the eave, someone sharpens a needle on a smooth stone, the rasp like a cricket practicing minimalism. The guard with the wolf in taxation story has brought a shield strap that learned to disagree with time. He borrows your beeswax, and in exchange he lends a little jar of gum tragacanth. For edges, he says. You dab it on the cut leather, and it dries with the tidy satisfaction of a freshly swept thought. Across from you, an old man repairs a sieve with date palm fibers, the pattern coming back to the wicker like a song that remembers its chorus. He hums. His hum says, every hole is an opportunity to practice being whole. A boy, newly deputized by dawn, arrives hugging a bundle of girth thongs like a nest of tame snakes. He lays them out by width and sings the sizes under his breath. This too is repair, teaching names to materials so they answer when called. You borrow a narrow strip to replace the tail rope on your camel's headstall, the one that keeps the beige comedian from sidestepping into someone else's breakfast. Joke 2 strolls by in sandals. You promise the judge a meticulously audited knot. The donkey blinks as if to say, submit your knot for review by noon. Near the tool chest squats a brazier the color of old decisions. A smith without a forge, traveling or merely awake, heats 2 bent nails and persuades them into straightness against the anvil's cousin, a block of iron that has seen empires come and go and develop opinions about hammers. He rivets a tiny ring back into a strap with 2 quiet taps, and then blows the heat away like a secret. Mainstream note that doesn't need to clear its throat: larger caravanserais often housed smiths, leatherworkers, pot menders, and carpenters, sometimes as resident craftsmen with bays, sometimes as dawn visitors who made a living out of other people's almosts. This inn looks like both kinds on different mornings. You take your tally stick from your belt and use the clean edge to press down a row of stitches, seeding them into the leather like seeds into tilled soil. An indulgence maybe, but your hands thank you for the flush finish. The woman with the sandal borrows your awl and returns it wrapped in a twist of cloth scented faintly with dill. Payment in fragrance, which should be a currency if it isn't already. You unroll her twist and find a thread of indigo tied into the corner, a joke and a blessing. May your knots hold and your moths take their business elsewhere. The jar, patched and pensive, receives a trial cup. The water dampens the resin line. No bead forms. The courtyard breathes out a little applause that barely disturbs the moths. You set the jar on its blanket and slide a reed mat between ceramic and stone, a small kindness you learned from a monk's wheel earlier, where pressure spreads and fractures decide not to practice drama. Joke 3 bows from the shadow of the tool chest. You consider awarding the jar a certificate in not spilling, decide to save paper for receipts and bedtime triangles. Somewhere above, drizzle bells switch hands, the roof pair trades roots, and the sound moves like light rain through leaves. You tie off the girth with the last showy half-hitch your teacher swore would impress both camels and editors. Then rub a smear of sesame oil into the leather so Dawn won't find it brittle. The patch looks like a calm sentence written across a previous argument. The sandal's sole glows faintly with fresh honesty. The jar sits taller. The cords, burnished and beeswaxed, line up like well-behaved commas waiting their turn. Historians still argue whether innkeepers officially maintained these communal kits or whether the road itself curated them tool by tool, favor by favor. The answer doesn't change the soft arithmetic of the hour. You borrowed, you returned, and you added a strip of felt and a length of thong to the chest because debt and thread both like to be even. You wiped the awl, closed the lid, and feel the courtyard stir as if the whole place just swallowed a yawn and agreed to wake up nicely. In the near-dawn hush, you tap your pocket. Glass bead, coins, the clay escort bead, and one last raisin, ceremonially off-duty. You give the raisin to your camel, who accepts it with the solemnity due a high official. The judge allows the moment, then approves the patchwork with a tiny hoof shuffle that sounds like a signature. The brazier lowers its eye. The east brightens like a page taking ink. Your hands waxed and fragrant release the night's tools back to their home. Repairs finished, you stand into the earliest light, and the road, hearing its name, leans slightly closer. Dawn lifts its first quiet eyebrow over the wall, and the courtyard answers with the soft choreography of waking. Ropes easing, straw settling, a ladle tapping the cistern like a courteous knock. Bread thumps the tandoor wall and freckles. Steam writes polite messages into the blue that used to be night. You step into the cool that lives between your shoulders and your scarf, and your camel exhales a line you could almost file in the ledger under contented. The judge clears his throat, as auditors do, and inspects your bundles with the solemnity of a donkey auditing dawn. Joke 1 winks. You ask him if the knots pass. He blinks yes, then adds a silent note about your left pannier's posture. The captain's lantern finds a last duty on the gatepost, wick trimmed to the humility of a thumbnail flame. He marks your name on the night list with a neat stroke, then tears the fringed stub and matches it to your slip. The edges kiss, and duty turns into daylight. Escort bead, he says, passing you the clay disc stamped with the inn's lion boar moon. You loop it on the lead rope where the sun will find it and make the promise visible. Mainstream fact to steady the strap. Along Islamic and Persianate routes, many caravanserais were supported by charitable endowments, waqf, whose funds kept lamps oiled, cisterns sound, and watch lists honest. Where endowments were absent or thin, traveler contributions like last night's coins bridged the gap between principle and breakfast. Historians still argue whether Sogdian managed houses leaned more on private merchant guilds or on local rulers' favors, but your palm, now light of coin and heavy with bead, prefers functioning realities to tidy categories. The ledger table has staged its morning scene. Reed pens stand like reeds again. The saucer with your witness raisin sits wrinkled and dignified, and a tiny triangle of paper naps under the scale. The clerk beckons. You set your tally stick half beside his. He fits them together, notches lining like teeth remembering one bite, and nods. He stamps the looped receipt once more, lighter impression, morning mood, and writes cleared in a hand so gentle the word feels like a breeze. Quirky house habit you've come to expect now. He flicks a single drop of rose water over the matched stick ends before stowing his half in the drawer as if to perfume the past. The drawer sighs, satisfied. Your half becomes a keepsake until the road gives it a new life as fire starter or bookmark. For now, it is evidence that trust can be cut and still remember how to join. Tips are their own grammar at this hour. You press a coin into the hostler's palm, not the kind you argue over at the scale, but the kind that turns straw into a better morning for everyone else's feet. A second coin follows the first, for the widow who mends the gate curtain, the captain mentioned last night. The clerk places it in a small wooden box with a chalked crescent on the lid. You leave 2 bread tokens on the kitchen tray, one for the girl with the ewer, one for the baker whose stamps make the loaves look like sunrise wearing jewelry. And you slip a raisin, ceremonial, off-duty, onto the saucer again so the day knows how it began. Joke 2 tiptoes through. You consider leaving a review carved into the tandoor, 5 stars, evenly toasted, but the bread already says what needs saying. At the prayer alcove, the lamp breathes its last steady line before breakfast. You pause, not to restage faith, but to leave a thumb slick of sesame in the tiny dish that keeps the wick from sulking. A monk sits back on his heels. The Zoroastrian reties his kusti. The Christian traveler palms the wooden cross token once, as if counting blessings like coins. You don't narrate it. You just let your gaze know how to bow again. Historians still argue whether Enns routinely kept interfaith corners within the walls, or whether dawn devotions mostly occurred under the exterior sky. The argument feels small compared to the lamp's practical glow. Back at your beast, the girth you patched has the handsome look of an apology done right. You settle the frame and felt pads, balance left dot and right dot, and lift the panniers in mirror order, until weight sits like a sentence that does not wander. The escort bead taps the rope with a ceramic hello. You slip the glass bead from your pouch and raise it once to the pale east. It catches a faint star attempting overtime, a tiny rehearsal for future nights when you will ask it harder questions. The judge stamps a hoof, entering his approval in the ledger of straw. Bells change hands on the roof, drizzle giving way to a thinner, almost invisible ring you could mistake for the sound of light arranging itself. The captain checks the roster and matches riders to caravans. The Merv merchant with the coffee habit, the Khotanese weaver with the rafts of bread, the vineyard who knows which slopes case like patience, and you. He hangs a second clay bead at the rear of the column, the guardian punctuation mark, and adjusts his wool cap in a gesture that means, without flourish, we will leave and we will arrive. A boy passes a bowl of salt. Each traveler pinches a grain and touches it to tongue and to thumb, sealing friendliness with something that refuses to rot. Fringe tidbit. Some road folk wet the thumb on salt and touch the gate lintel as they pass, marking a promise to return if salt remembers me. Laughable? Possibly. Comforting? Definitely. Your thumb rises, tastes, touches, and the gate accepts the small, clean theater. A woman from Turfan threads a scrap of indigo through your strap and ties a square knot. Moths forget you, she says, smiling, and you understand the currency of tiny blessings. The gatekeeper tests the hinge, smooth from oil and habit, and positions himself to take maims one last time. Same whisper, lower volume. You give yours, plus a destination the sky already knows. He gives the courtyard's benediction. Go with straight scales and reins that do not argue. Joke 3 raises a sleepy hand. Your camel asks with a look whether there is a raisin per parasong policy. You inform it that compensation is tied to performance reviews. It chews in what you generously interpret as assent. The clerk returns your loop, now marked with a neat "cleared," and sets your matched half-stick beside it, a small pair of oars for the morning's paper boat. You tuck both away, then press coin and thanks into the watchman's hand. He will sleep after sunrise, a profession older than empires. You nod to the money changer, whose touchstone yawns, to the storyteller, who wraps his reed mat like a secret, and to the cat, who has audited the tandoor and found it compliant. Hooves write the first sentence of the day on the packed earth. The escort rides ahead 2 lengths, bells set to weather report, neither brag nor alarm. You follow through the arch with your left foot, because the road has a sense of humor, and the gate's shadow crosses your face like a line in a book you have been waiting to read. Behind, the clerk blows the last drop of rosewater from his fingers. Ahead, Orion has tucked himself into daylight's pocket. Above, the lion-boar moon on your bead frowns at bandits, insects, and inefficient packing. You do what the courtyard taught you. You keep your voice where quiet can hear it. You let your eyes adjust before they judge. You put sweetness first when speech arrives. The gatekeeper lifts his ring of keys, their chorus a small brass goodbye. The arch keeps its cool, salted thumbprint. Your camel leans into the first parasong as if it has been practicing all night, and frankly, it has been. The road takes the weight without complaint. A promise rings in the hooves, not loud, not boastful, but steady. The kind of promise a place like this knows how to keep. You will go, and if Salt remembers you, you will come back, and the saucer will be waiting for one more raisin to witness a new quiet.
The road accepts you again with that tolerant shrug it saves for regulars. Hoofbeats fold into a steady paragraph. The escort bead on the lead rope taps punctuation, and your camel resumes its thesis on chewing. Sand hushes underfoot like a silk scarf being agreed upon. You glance back once through the gate, the lantern now a pale coin in daylight, and the courtyard reduces itself to a single idea: sweetness, ink, and the practiced decency of people who like sleep. You carry that idea forward the way you carry water, stoppered, guarded, rationed, and shared when sharing keeps everyone gentle. By mid-morning, the pass opens like a hand, and the wind does accounting on your scarf. You pace the distance in parasangs and in jokes, promise to yourself if the hill behaves. Joke 1, if the hill negotiates a lower gradient, you'll authorize a bonus raisin at the cairn. The cairn greets you with its flat ledger stone. You set 1 raisin on it, let the sun warm the promise, then eat it with the scandalized joy of a thief who only steals from superstition. Mainstream fact to keep the stride honest. Across late antiquity and the early medieval centuries, Sogdian colonies dotted the line of oases from Samarkand east to the Tarim Basin, leaving letters near Dunhuang that worry about overdue debts, lost bales, and the lovable chaos of family, proof that the road's biggest cargo is continuity. You think of the clerk's rosewater, the eggshell blot, the lion-boar moon winking from the loop in your belt, and realize you're personally smuggling continuity toward the next gate. The escort pair turns their bells to weather report and points with chins at a stripe of green in the blue distance. Wadi ahead, water arguing politely with gravity. You count in chews for the first hour because your camel is in a cooperative mood. When the rhythm falters, the animal has discovered a philosophical objection to a particular pebble. You switch to steps, then to bead checks, lifting the glass charm until a sliver of starlight pretends to be trapped again. Quirky habit, yes, but you've learned that small rituals are just tools with better manners. The escort captain tells a story about a roof tile that fell exactly when a bandit had a change of heart, a coincidence he still attributes to lamp oil accounting. You laugh softly and keep your thumb on the clay bead's groove as if the inn's promise can travel the rope like a whispered blessing. Around noon, a merchant joins from a sidetrack with bales that smell of walnut hulls and iron gall, the scent of paper on its way to becoming somebody's paperwork. He has receipts pinched into triangles, each crease a superstition and a filing system. Your looped slip recognizes its cousins and sits up straighter. He praises your knots, you praise his patience with numbers. Both of you agreed to save the real bargaining for courtyards where saucers are trained to witness. Historians still argue whether the etiquette you practiced last night, raisins, salt, whisper names, drizzle bells, was written rule, guild habit, or 1,000-year compost of customs laid down by people who preferred not to be robbed of either sleep or dignity. Whatever the origin, you can feel the form traveling with you like a shadow you're happy to own. Afternoon pulls the light thin enough to see through. You move within the caravan like punctuation, sometimes comma, sometimes em dash, never period. The judge, auditing the day from his important donkeyness, inserts one hoof note to object to a crosswind. You adjust the pannier's angle by 2 fingers and pass the motion unanimously. Joke 2, you promise the donkey a performance bonus in pats. It accepts in advance. The rope hums. The escort rides a length ahead, reading the dust for narratives you'd miss. The boot that turned twice, the goat that changed its mind, the new pebble story your camel would have written if given the chance. You learn again that safety isn't drama, it's practiced attention. Somewhere between the last rocky fold and the first scrub, a gate grows from the mirage. Square walls, cool arch, a promise of troughs and a kitchen that understands barley. You feel the outline of etiquette lighting up in your chest. Dismount before the lintel, shake a shy cloud of dust, let your voice learn the courtyard's volume before it speaks. You already taste the raisin pouch opening like a small, polite sunrise. Joke 3, you tell yourself not to ask about the inn's USB port. The part of your brain that misses printers subsides under the smell of mint and ash soap. Inside, the rhythm is comforting as déjà vu done right, a gatekeeper with eyebrows that once auditioned for command, a clerk whose fingers smell faintly of rose, a saucer waiting for its single edible witness, a token tray where bread economics keeps peace with lamp oil. The signet here isn't the lion-boar moon, but a stag leaping, a cousin to your moon-faced friend, and your looped receipt looks over with professional curiosity. You whisper your name, your origin, your destination. The wall writes it down without argument. In the stable, beasts sing their separate instruments into one sleepy orchestra. Someone has hung a tiny sachet of dill under the arch, and suddenly last night's rumor turns into tonight's air. You thank it. The sachet pretends not to hear. You find yourself performing the same courtesies you learned as if they were your first language. Raisin to saucer, salt to thumb, coin to tray, gratitude offered to the unseen chain of hands stretching from field to tendoor to bowl. You notice new local quirks. Here, the boy marks watch lists with dots of saffron. There, the storyteller's bowl is carved with waves, as if the desert enjoys pretending it is a sea. But the structure holds: sweetness first, then ink, then rest. You are becoming a citizen of this republic of small decencies where membership dues are paid in quiet. When the ledger breathes your name into its lines again, your shoulders drop the way roofs do after rain passes. You have carried more than bolts of cloth between these walls. You have ferried a method. If the road is a sentence, caravanserais are commas, and you, raisin pouch diplomat, are the low voice that reads the line without tripping. You bed your camel, nod to the donkey auditor, and let the drizzle bell practice its weather. The moon, lion boar here, leaping stag there, stamps the corner of your evening. The saucer watches, crumbs of sunlight wrinkled inside it, pleased that you remembered the flavor of peace.
Wind down. And now the light thins even further, and the day you have carried begins to loosen, the way a knot loosens when wax remembers it was once soft, and your breath slows to match the courtyard's slowest sound, perhaps the hush of straw settling, perhaps the tiny ring of a bell that refuses to hurry. And you let those sounds surround you like a shawl draped by a careful friend. You have walked a long paragraph, and you have read a gentle grammar, the one that says sweetness first, then ink, then rest. And you can feel that grammar quieting every bright corner of your mind, filing the edges, shelving the worries, until even the most insistent thought lowers its voice and learns to whisper instead. You think of the raisin left on the saucer, still doing its small, contented job of witness, and of the clay bead riding the rope like a sleepy planet, and of the glass bead you lift to the sky only when the sky agrees to be kind. And each image folds into the next until they are not separate objects at all, but a single soft light you can carry behind your eyelids, steady as a lamp cupped against wind, warm as a baker's oven when the last loaf rests, and you find yourself buoyed by that warmth, floating just above the mat, just above the straw, just above the tired places that have finally been given permission to be tired. And whether you are at the first gate or the fifth, whether the sign shows a lion boar moon or leaping stag, you know the ritual will repeat, and that repetition is a promise, and that promise is a cradle, and you allow the cradle to sway you a little, to sway you more, to sway you into the deep blue room behind your eyes, where voices become distant, and bells become drizzle, and drizzle becomes breath. Let the ledger close with a soft sigh. Let the tandoor keep one more ember for morning. Let your name, written neatly in the margin of tonight, rest exactly where it belongs, safe, small, and surrounded by kindness. Sleep well, traveler. The road will remember you, and the gate will be waiting. And for now, the only duty left is to drift. End of story. Sweet dreams.